aliens say human biology makes no sense. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, there were few species that could boast such remarkable diversity as the ones in the Galactic Union. From the towering Eryxians with their quadruple hearts and biometallic skeletons to the gaseous Xanthire, whose existence was a continuous fluctuation of molecules. The Union was a collection of beings that stretched the limits of biological imagination. Each species had evolved over millennia to thrive in its specific environment, adapting with precision to the harsh realities of their homeworlds. But none were as perplexing as humans. Sitting in the Union's grand research facility, deep within the bowels of the space station Ornithus, Zerlak, chief biologist of the conclave, stared at his console in disbelief. He had seen strange things in his centuries of scientific exploration, but the data coming from the specimen labeled human was beyond baffling. To him and his team of multi-species scientists, the biological blueprint of humanity was like a poorly constructed puzzle, one that seemed to defy all logical understanding. "Are you certain these readings are accurate?" Zerlak asked, turning his many eyes towards his assistant, a Lithorian with a crystalline brain capable of performing billions of calculations per second. "Yes, Chief. We've run the scans a dozen times," his assistant replied, glowing faintly as the circuits in her crystalline structure pulsed with activity. "There's no error. The data is consistent." Zerlak's tentacles curled in frustration. "Then how do you explain it? None of this makes sense. Every cell, every organ system in these creatures seems to be working against each other, and yet they function, they thrive." This wasn't the first time the conclave had encountered humans. Several decades earlier, when the species had been newly discovered, they had been catalogued as an oddity. Their limited technological capabilities meant they were not yet worthy of full diplomatic relations with the Galactic Union, but their tenacity and resilience on their home planet had piqued the interest of many. Earth, a so-called death world filled with hostile environments and dangerous fauna, had bred a species that had somehow thrived in conditions where others would perish. And now, after a series of skirmishes and trade negotiations, humans were gaining prominence. Yet despite centuries of study, their biology remained an enigma. The puzzle of human biology. Zerlak reviewed the medical scans once again. Human biology, at first glance, seemed typical enough. They had a circulatory system, a nervous system, musculature, and a complex brain. But it was the intricacies and the anomalies within these systems that caused every alien biologist in the Union to scratch their heads if they had heads to scratch. For one, humans were far more fragile than many species in the Union. Their bones were easily breakable compared to the armored exoskeletons of the Harktile, and their skin was susceptible to everything from radiation to infections. Their immune system was primitive by Galactic Union standards, relying on outdated mechanisms like antibodies and white blood cells rather than the bioengineered defenses other species had evolved. And yet, humans healed quickly, sometimes alarmingly so. "Look at this!" Zerlak exclaimed, pulling up a holographic projection of a human cellular structure. "Do you see how their cells regenerate after injury? It's chaotic. There's no coordination, no efficiency, and yet they manage to heal faster than some of the most advanced species in the Union." His assistant studied the display, her crystalline brain whirring as she processed the data. It's almost as if the cells operate independently, without waiting for instructions from the central nervous system. "Exactly," Zerlak said, gesturing with his tentacles. "It's completely inefficient, yet it works. And don't even get me started on their nervous system." The human nervous system was another conundrum. It seemed to be based on outdated chemical and electrical signals, far slower than the quantum neural systems of more advanced species. In theory, humans should have been slow to react, but they weren't. In fact, their reflexes were almost on par with species who had evolved instantaneous reaction times. And then there was the matter of pain. "They should be incapacitated by their injuries," Zerlak muttered, staring at a report from a battle where humans had sustained serious wounds but continued fighting. Yet they simply pushed through. How can a species so physically fragile withstand so much pain? The more Zerlak studied humans, the less sense they made. He had once theorized that perhaps humans were simply a young species that hadn't yet evolved to their full potential. But after years of research, that theory fell apart. Humans had been around for millennia, and yet they seemed to thrive in their imperfections.